Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the channel. Yeah.
Hello. Welcome to the channel. This is Kamaria or Black Siren Creates, and we are talking about my January wrap up. I'm in my car as usual, waiting to pick up my children from school. So I will say that January was interesting. I think there was a lot of the first 2 weeks of January were great. The second 2 weeks of January were not so great. I had a lot of things going on. My mom broke her back, my uncle died, and then, January 20th. If you know, you know. I hopefully don't have to elaborate. So I read a total of 8 books. But 3 DNFs. So we can start with the DNFs, because 2 of them, if you watched my other videos, you've already heard about, and I DNF'd them. So one of them was the Naturalist Society. Even though the magic system was really cool, I just didn't care. It was just boring. The magic system seemed cool. It was Regency. It had a lot of, it had an autistic character. It had some queer characters. But at the end of the day, I wasn't finding myself reaching for it. I wasn't, like a lot of times it's more like, I can't stop reading it. And if I find myself not picking it up, I'm just gonna stop reading it. And then the other one, which I talked about previously, was Music is History by Questlove, who's like a member of The Roots, a kind of hip-hop group. And that was super interesting to start, but then it just kind of went like this. Like, when he was talking about the history, it was really good, and how that music and history and how we remember history. But then he started just meandering, like stream of consciousness meandering, and I think I got like 30 or 40% in, and I was like, nah, no thanks. And then another one I DNF'd was Alpha Dragon's Cat. I think it's by Hawk Oakley. That's a non-binary author who writes a lot of male romance. And this was like an Omegaverse, but with like dragons finding their Omega mates, who were like shifter people, like different types of shifters. There were tigers, there were dogs, it was whatever. And when it got to the steamy time, I'm not trying to like yuck anybody's yum here, but once they started trying to have like sexy time with inflatable toys from like a pool, I had to tap out. Like, I like smut as much as the next person, but you want to introduce inflatable pool toys? I'm sorry, next. So those were like my DNF. So those are like, when I say DNF, I mean like I got like 20 or 30% into the book. Because there are a lot of times where I will pick up a book, read like the first chapter, and be like, nope, not today. And I don't really count those as DNFs, because either it's just not working for me, or I'm just not in the mood for it right then, so I don't really count that as a DNF. But so the rest of them, I'm going to go in chronological order. Everything for You by Chloe Leese. It's the 5th book in the Bergman Brothers series, or Bergman sibling series, I guess, because there's one girl. It's basically a series. There's like 8 or 9 books where it follows this like Swedish, I think, family, and they all are trying to find their happily ever after. And I mean, there's a lot of like different types of stuff that we don't normally see in romance, which was nice. Like, you know, some of them have ADHD or autism, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic pain, digestive issues, diabetes, but it's kind of like one, if you read one of them, you kind of read all of them. Like, the first one I read, I really like resonated with, so I kept reading like the rest of them, and I kind of read them out of order, just depending on like what I was in the mood for, and it just got too same, and there are too many characters to keep track of, and goodbye. The next book I read after that, This Could Be Us. It's number 2 in the Skyland series by Kennedy Ryan. It follows a group of like besties, and this one was a reread for me. So it's about a woman who is married and was a stay-at-home mom and sacrificed her whole world, you know, for her man and her kids, and then, you know, he cheats on her, and she has to kind of figure out, you know, how to get back on her feet and provide for her kids without her man. And there, you know, she does end up falling in love, but kind of falling in love with yourself first. Like RuPaul says, if you don't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else? It was really good. I just needed a book that I knew was going to be good. So that's what I got. The next one was Heavenly Tyrant, which I had been waiting for forever. It came out in December, but it was supposed to come out like April of 2024, and I was waiting for it. But we finally got it. I loved the first book in this series, Iron Widow. It was one of my favorite books in the year I read it. I don't remember if it was 2022, I think. And I've reread it since then, and it's still good. It's basically Pacific Rim, make it Chinese, and have your main character full of female rage, trying to take down the patriarchy. So good. So good. But this book, and it's going to be a trilogy, so the middle book is always weird. Let's just admit that. So there was a lot of, I would say people would probably think a lot of pacing issues, but it was all for a purpose this time. Because it's like, what do you do when you overthrow an oppressive government and you're 19 and have to make a new government and you're uneducated and you don't know what the heck you're doing? So, of course, there's going to be a lot of governmental stuff in there. And so some people didn't like it. And the last third of this book, Heavenly Tyrant, was a trip, y'all. They're in space and they're cyborgs and woo! But it's still good. It was still a good time. Like, I'm going to continue the series. It wasn't as good as number 1, but I still liked it. The next one I read was Finding You by E.M. Lindsay. It's another, male romance. And this is what I do when I need like a palate cleanser. I'll just go on Kindle Unlimited and find like a kind of steamy romance novel. And E.M. Lindsay is really good at coming like lots of diversity. So there's lots of ethnicities, different backgrounds, different disabilities. It's great. So this one is a part of a series of a whole bunch of single dads finding love, and they're all queer, and it is a good time. The next one I read, I've already talked about a little bit before, is Immortal Dark. This one is definitely my favorite of the whole month. It's dark academia. It's black vampires. I loved it. It's a debut book. It had a lot of info dumping. It had a lot of issues as far as the world building and things, but I just loved it so much because it was so unapologetically black. And I just needed something unapologetically black. And I'm really excited for the rest of the series, and I'm excited to see how the author kind of comes into her own and finds her voice within the narrative. So after that, book, and I had actually, once I finished it, I kind of started to read it again because I was just so like in the world, and it kind of put me into like a book hangover. So like it was so good, everything else that I tried to read just couldn't measure up. It's like, you're not going to be as good as that book, so why bother, girl? But I continued. I read number 10 in the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire, Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear. And we follow a character that we've met before, and we kind of learn her backstory. And if you don't know, the Wayward Children series is a series that's like Portal series. So like Narnia, we go through a door and we're at a different world. And it's basically what happens when those kids come back to the real world and how they kind of have to readjust and figure out how to live in the real world again. But I will always read anything in the Wayward Children series, even because they're kind of hit and miss for me, but I will always read. I will always read them until Seanan McGuire is done writing them. But the next book I read, I was still in like a book hangover, and honestly, I needed a break from fiction because I was having a hard time with all the stuff going on in my life and in the world, and I started reading a book called Black AF History by Michael Harriot, and it's been on my TBR for like a long time, and I finally got to it. So it's basically just like reading history more accurately, I guess, of how this country got to be created. And we all know that what we learn in elementary school and even high school is not really accurate history. So this was just kind of looking at it through a black lens of, how black people were treated and all that stuff, but it's done in a very like accessible way because he kind of talks in, African American vernacular, and it's like you're just having a conversation with the dude. So it makes history very accessible. But if you're looking for like hardcore history with like footnotes and stuff, like he did the research, like it's accurate. It's just not going to be an academic work. Let's just say that. And then the last book I read, because like I said, the last 2 weeks of January were just not great. So I needed another kind of palate cleanser, popcorn book, and I read a book, Passing Through Purgatory. And it's another like steamy romance novel with 2 male characters, but this one is set in like if the gates of hell opened, but like everybody was chill, and you have humans going into like the different circles of hell and just meeting different species and demons and falling in love. It was cozy because the main character like worked in like a cafe in hell and he fell in love with a demon, and it was just good times. There's a lot of found family in there and lots of different types of humanoid creatures. It was a good time. It was too long. It was like 400 pages, and I don't understand why you need a romance novel over 250, 300, but it was still a good time. And it kind of wraps it up. I will say I don't really star rate anymore because I think reading is so subjective that star rating is kind of dumb, because what works for me might not work for somebody else. And I'm not reviewing my books in any kind of professional capacity, so I don't really feel the need to do a star rating. I'll just tell you, like, did I have a good time? Yes or no? And here are the reasons why. But hopefully you enjoyed my kind of monthly wrap up. February plans. It's Black History Month, even though you should read diversely all the time. But I might do a blackout just to challenge myself a little bit. So everything I read is by a Black author. but I'm a mood reader, so we'll see how that goes. But that's all I have for you today, book nerds. Bye.